What's going on YouTube? It's Teej, back again with another video, and today we're here to talk about my Week 17 NFL Power Rankings, and hopefully you all had a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and ultimately got to enjoy a up and down weekend of football in my opinion, and hopefully you're excited for this video. Quickly, I want to give you an update. I do have my off season once we get through the post-season, what I'm planning out my content schedule to be, but that being said, if you have anything you want me to cover, let me know down in the comment section. Also, part of my 2023 content plan is doing live stream mocks, so if that is something that interests you, I'd love to have your input down below. What time of day maybe works best for those live streams? Well, that's sort of fun stuff. So let me hear your thoughts down below. But without further ado, let's start talking about these power rankings. Nothing crazy here at the bottom. A lot of movement though this week here on the bottom, page of these power rankings. So that's kind of exciting. Bears now my new worst team in the league. With Houston getting a win, things get reshuffled a little bit, and ultimately, the Bears. Maybe it was close a little early on. They ran the ball okay. Montgomery gets in the end zone on that first drive. But I think Buffalo did a great job limiting Justin Fields. And ultimately, once you take away the running ability of Fields, I didn't think he looked bad as a passer, but his team let him down from that point on. And that's kind of the advantage of him being a rusher. Makes you play both, but also he can just take care of it himself. So it feels like a team that's still just kind of letting down their young quarterback, Justin Fields. The Broncos, I just did a video on them firing Nathaniel Hackett. How do you think the season's going so far? So obviously they're now second to last team here in these power rankings. And Sunday was an embarrassment. Sunday's game slate was embarrassing, but this was the worst of the worst. And the team basically just gave up after falling behind. Russell Wilson didn't look good. Brett Rippon, when he comes in, and you get the fighting and the pushing, the shoving on the sideline with Rippon and Dalton Risner, and it's just a total mess. And I thought the Broncos, defense would be able to, hold their own in this one, but Baker Mayfield and the Rams carved them up. And again, I think that kind of goes back to, hey, well, if the defense isn't getting stops, then what are we wasting our Christmas for? So, yeah, tough time to be a Broncos fan for sure, especially, coming into the season with such high expectations. Then we get the Falcons at 30. Man, it is ugly. I do want to say Arthur Smith was hot on the sideline all day long, and he was probably the only thing that was warm in the state of Maryland this past weekend. Obviously, a ton of cold weather throughout the country, but I will say that challenge that did not get overturned midway through the third quarter on that Pruitt catch, I have no idea how that wasn't a catch. That clearly looked like one. Maybe they had an angle that they weren't showing on the broadcast. They only showed the one look on the Fox feed, but how was that not a catch? Anyways, that's a small point in the game, and they lost 17-9 to Baltimore with Baltimore playing their backup quarterback Tyler Huntley. That statement kind of sums up where the Falcons are right now. Desmond Ridder does not look great throwing the football. Drake London, fumbles for a second consecutive week. Young team with young players making mistakes. Now the question is going to be what does this team do quarterback-wise this offseason? Because in some ways I could see Desmond Ridder kind of getting that Davis Mills treatment, right? But at the same time, if Arthur Smith has the team in a position where they're picking towards the top of the draft in 2024, is he still going to be the head coach? This might be his only opportunity to draft a first-round quarterback. So that makes that decision that much harder. And I think because of that, they might ultimately budge and draft, Will Levis or C.J. Stroud this NFL draft. Then we get the Colts. I know they're down 5 spots. That feels like a harsh, dropping considering they've been kind of bad the last couple of weeks. Part of it's an overcorrection. They were kind of due for a slide. And, Monday Night Football did nothing to inspire confidence. Nick Foles did not look very good. There's not a whole lot of positives I can take from this game. Zach Moss looked okay, but still Zach Moss is on instead of Jonathan Taylor. The slot position with no Kenny Moore has just been carved up whenever he's not in the lineup for the Colts team. And, he can sometimes be kind of a forgotten about star just because he plays that slot. But, if you haven't watched Indianapolis without Kenny Moore, now you know his importance because, damn, Keenan Allen had a day and probably should have gotten in the end zone. But anyways, this is a bad team that should be picking towards the top of the draft, so they should embrace it. The Texans move up with a win, and they're still comfortably picking number 1 overall. So it was kind of a win-win, right? You still get that draft position, but you also get to feel good. And they've been battling pretty hard the last couple of weeks. And this is the exact reason why Davis Mills should have been starting the whole year. I hate when they went to Kyle Allen because there's an off chance that Davis Mills could be the better quarterback in the game, especially when, it's Malik Wilson on the other side. He still looks raw. He still looks rough. We'll talk about the Titans later on. But with Kyle Allen, you weren't going to fall. I don't think you were going to stumble into something like that. Davis Mills, he's shown enough, at least to be like, hey, maybe on one random week he could be the better quarterback, or he could be a quarterback good enough to make some big plays and keep us in the game. And I think that's exactly what happened. Plus, the Texans' run defense held, quote unquote, Derrick Henry to 126 yards. They finally snapped the streak of him running for 200 plus against him. So marginal improvement, still improvement nonetheless. They're up to 28. Then we get the Cardinals down a couple spots. Trace McSorley looked rough. I will say at the beginning of the game, dude was just straight up slinging it. And I was like, you know what? let's have some fun. Be a Taylor Heineke type. Let's do this. But man, he just could not hit throws. He had like that one good ball to Hollywood Brown, and that was about it. So yeah, probably a frustrating night for DeAndre Hopkins and crew. But I mean, this offense is just, it's rough when it's not Kyler Murray. And now you got Cliff Kingsbury saying there's a bunch of friction in there, and I'm actually going to be doing a video about why Sean Payton's going to be the next head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. So I'll kind of get off my Cardinals tangents here, save it for another day, but I mean, it's just a bad football team. Raiders, I'm actually have them stay in place because I still think they're better than the teams below them, basically. You still have Devontae Adams, who, even though he's quiet, that type of trump card over everybody below them, I think is still live, plus Waller, Renfro, and stuff. But man, Derek Carr, man, that was an ugly one. I don't know what got into him. Maybe that's, Franco Harris. We'll talk about the Steelers in a little bit, and I have a tangent to go through there. But, maybe it's Franco Harris, moving the ball around, and that's creating, turnovers, whatever, if you believe in, that level of spirituality. But, man, Derek Carr looked bad, man. So that is really not a big boost of confidence about what this team might want to do with him this offseason and the direction they might want to take this team. So, yeah, big yikes there. And actually, the defense held up until that last drive, but yeah, Steelers Raiders kind of a true rematch of the Immaculate Reception. I mean, 13 points for the team that wins, and the Steelers have a rookie score the game-winning touchdown. In a lot of ways, it was history repeating itself. But yeah, sorry, Raiders fans, another blown lead. Panthers up another handful of spots, and I do want to give them credit here because I feel like I've been pretty mean to Carolina all year, and I still got them here at 25. But this game next week, I guess, dictates who's going to win the NFC South. They're still live. Steve Wilkes, I think, has stabilized the floor of this franchise, and I think what we really can kind of glean from this is Matt Rule is going to be I think he's going to be a good coach at the college level once again, right? Wisconsin, right? Yeah, I think that's going to be a good place for him. He feels like one of those college rah-rah, like he's good at the front of the room when it's a, 18 to 23-year-old, not when it's a professional getting paid and it's a grown-ass man, So I think Steve Wilkes has kind of shifted that a little bit to back to where it feels like a professional workplace and, an NFL team. And this run game, it's really interesting to look at Carolina and San Francisco and how both rushing attacks on that trade, the CMC trade, have gotten better. Like, obviously, San Francisco gets Christian McCaffrey, who's a great running back, plus his pass catching ability. And especially their situation now starting Brock Purdy, it feels like, man, you really need that, ultra pacifier that is Christian McCaffrey that just makes everything easier. He is the best outlet Brock Purdy could possibly have, given his situation, 7th-round rookie. But on the other side, Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Foreman, both run for 150 plus. It felt like the Lions' run defense was playing at a peewee level. But that aside, Sam Darnold's also playing okay. And also, I think the lock here moving forward is anytime there's a quarterback going against that Lions defense, bet their over-rushing prop. Josh Allen did it in the first half of his game on Thanksgiving. Then a couple weeks ago, Trevor Lawrence gets hurt, but he still hits. And then Sam Darnold does it this week. So this Carolina team is just finding enough offense. DJ Moore making enough plays. He always has a high target share when Sam Darnold's his quarterback. So I still think they're a great football team. They have some pieces on defense, but the run game, I'm giving it some respect here. That run game can be lethal. Let's go ahead and move on now. Next group of teams, we get the LA Rams. They've been kind of pinballing back and forth with Baker Mayfield in the lineup. That fourth quarter comeback, I'm like, okay, let's go. That's lit. Let's go. Move them up into this screen and then back down after, they kind of came crashing down to earth. The offense looked legit against a really good defense. Now, how much is that Denver kind of rolling over and dying versus, the Rams earning it? That is open to interpretation. But I think they're going to be able to move the ball okay. And I think Baker Mayfield's looking solid enough. So we'll have to wait and see. I'll be interested to see if Aaron Donald decides to come back to play. I would imagine he's probably not because the season's basically a wash. So this is going to be an interesting team when it comes to the draft. And also that game in and of itself, that Rams-Broncos game was really fascinating because it's Rams-Broncos on the field, but in reality, it's Lions and Seahawks draft-wise going head-to-head there. So it's kind of a fun game for a different perspective. But, hey, credit to Baker Mayfield and the Rams. The offense looked really good. I'm just really excited to see what this team does in the offseason. Is Sean McVay sticking around? A lot of different question marks that need answers there. Then we get to the Washington Commanders. I mean, they were just outclassed against San Francisco. So they're down a spot because they lost. But, I mean, did a lot of people expect that to be close? If you did, I'm sorry. You got the wrong side of that one. That was a bad read. But good to see Chase Young play pretty good in this game. Made some big impact. Actually exceeded his, snap count that we were told, before the game started. So it's good to see him be able to make some plays and some impacts against a player like Trent Williams, right? It's good to see him get wins against Trent Williams. I will say, those two charted, wins using PFF's data were both on inside counters. And he's such an interesting player because he's so athletically gifted and he can be so dominant. You would think he want to go outside shoulder, beat tackles around the edge. But he almost always wants to bring it back inside. I'd love to see throughout the rest of the season, Can he diversify that portfolio, so to speak, and be able to win on the outside, off of outside shoulders, and then also be able to bring that back inside with an inside counter? Or is it just going to be inside counter the rest of the year? Anyways, moving on now. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns. Down a couple more spots. That game was weird, and it was ugly. And, I mean, the wins, obviously, -26. There's a lot of factors, coming into account. So, like, if you're a Browns fan, if you want to throw this one out, I totally get it. But, I mean, Deshaun Watson didn't look great. The run game was very inefficient. The run game for the Browns team and the run blocking in specific has really kind of deteriorated throughout the course of the season, which is kind of a weird thing because that is, the Browns' identity, in my opinion. I mean, that's what you think of when you think of Cleveland. Now, maybe that'll shift with Deshaun Watson, but, the last couple of years, it's like, well, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and that run game, that's what the Browns are. And that's really kind of lost some of its luster, or it's kind of lost some of its power and its efficiency over the last couple of weeks. So, a little weird there, something to monitor throughout the rest of the season. The Steelers up a handful of spots. I contemplated maybe keeping the Browns over the Steelers. I'd be interested to see what that, head-to-head looks like if those two teams played, right here, right now. But, Kenny Pickett may not be insane, but I still think he's given me enough. He's given me enough to where I wasn't crazy about him draft-wise. He's my QB4, right? I wasn't anybody I was, enthralled about, but he's doing enough to give me some optimism moving forward, so that's encouraging. Obviously, the conditions of that game weren't great. They actually moved the ball okay, a couple missed field goals, but it's kind of that same problem for Pittsburgh where it's like, again, you're selling for field goals, right? Like, we need to get in the end zone, right? So Boswell goes 2 for 4 kicking it, and those are 4 drives where you did enough to get in the field goal range, right? Like, can we do a little bit more? Let's try to find the end zone. That continues to plague this team, but George Pickens is the man. I mean, I don't know what else I can say about that. That's really the bright spot of this offense. George Pickens is a stud, and the defense has been playing really, really well. This week they generated a ton of turnovers, but the pass rush was there as well. So Pittsburgh kind of, in their own Pittsburgh ways, keeping themselves in the playoff mix. And can Mike Tomlin avoid that losing record? Can he do it another year? Which I thought this was definitely the year where it kind of ended. The streak comes to a close. He has that first losing season, but maybe I was wrong. So on to the Titans now. Down a few spots, and I mean, you lose to the Texans, team 32. That's a pretty bad loss, and also Malik Wilson's my QB1, and I mean, partially just in case you weren't around the channel, part of the reason Kenny Pickett was lower versus Malik Wilson being higher, you'd look at these two guys and how they played this Sunday and be like, what the hell was this guy looking at? Last year's quarterback class sucked. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves. It was not a very good quarterback class. It was the worst since probably 2013. So in that case, it's like swing for the fences. I'm already a guy who I'm hunting trades. I want the highest upside. I like a Will Levis. I like a Josh Allen. He's number 1 player in my 2018 draft board. So for me, it was like, if all these guys are going to suck, take a shot on Malik Willis, because if all works out, like if everything came together perfectly for all of these quarterbacks, nobody would be as good as Malik Willis. Maybe Sam Howell. But again, that's why Howell's my QB2. So just for a little bit of an explanation there. But yeah, he does not look ready by any stretch of the imagination. It has been rough when he's been a starter. So that's disappointing. They can still run it well, but if Malik Willis is the quarterback, that it's going to be a struggle bus. And we're going to get to see him on Thursday night against Dallas. I think that might be a disaster. But I assume they're going to try to have Tannehill by any means possible out on the field week 18 for that game between them and the Jags, who come in at number 19. That's going to decide the AFC South. Jags, hey, another solid win on Thursday Night Football. I know it's only like 19 points you put up, but I think that's like an honest earnings against the Jets defense. Trevor Lawrence, I think, put some good balls on tape, used his legs. I mean, I think a lot of that was really, really solid. The Jags defense looks solid, but a lot of that's just like Zach Wilson's bag and Chris Streveler. I mean, what is Chris Streveler? So, but, former CFL quarterback. So, Jags, all in all, impressive performance and a very, forgettable Thursday Night Football game. Then the Saints up a spot. They're the other side of that Browns game where it's like, if you want to throw this out, I totally understand, just because the variables with the weather are just so extreme that, it's kind of hard to really take anything you got from this game and any sort of, stat as true, valid information. It definitely is skewed a little bit, but hey, give a ton of credit to the Saints. I mean, this is also the game why you have a Taysom Hill, right? And I want to give credit to Judah Forking. Judah Forking, I think that's how you say his name. Writes for PFF, and one of his, same game parlays that he pitched out was basically Andy Dalton can't get it done in the wind, which check mark. They had to turn to Taysom Hill, which check mark. He gets in the end zone and runs for over like 35 yards, which he did that in one play. So, yeah, I mean, really solid read there from Judah, and I mean that's kind of the advantage of having a Taysom Hill on your roster, right? Like, push comes to shove, you can just make it a 1940s, 1950s, 1960s football team and just have basically two running back system in the backfield. So, credit the Saints for using all the cards up their sleeve. Then the Giants down a spot. Hey, they battled with Minnesota, but yeah, another game where you're just not as good as the team across from you. So they're continuing to regress down to the mean, but I am really encouraged by the fight this team continues to show. Saquon Barkley, that big chunk play at the end, anytime a superstar makes a superstar play, it's like, wow, okay, that's cool to watch, that's fun. Daniel Jones, making enough happen, So this team still it feels like they need a number one wide receiver. If only they had like a Kenny Galladay on the roster. Oh wait, so they still have a huge hole in the roster and how it's constructed at the moment, but they're still battling, and I can respect that. On to the top 16 now. We get the New England Patriots, also down a handful of spots. What a weird game, right? Like 2/3 of your offensive production comes off a pick six, and then Hail Mary swatted down to Jacoby Myers, just waiting for it. So really weird way to get your points, but nonetheless, I give credit to the Patriots battling back. They did cover the spread, so for those who bet New England plus 4.5 or whatever it was, congratulations on your earnings. But yeah, this team is still ways away. And Mac Jones, I don't think it looked all that great, right? So the Patriots kind of another team that's kind of falling down the board here, kind of finding its true home as we get further and further into the season. The Buccaneers, actually, Tom Brady's former team, former Patriot, actually move up a couple spots. So credit to Tampa Bay. Then we get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers up a couple spots, and it's frustrating, right? Because I think I saw the stat, Brady on passes of 10 plus true air yards was 2 of 7 for 2 picks, no touchdowns. Ugly. I mean, this was an ugly Sunday Night Football game, and I can't believe it was still the Sunday Night Football game by the time we got there. But the Buccaneers should ever be favored by more than 7 or 6.5 for that matter against anybody, because this is exactly why. The Buccaneers, every time it feels like they're moving it, just find a way to shoot themselves in the foot until they stop. Which late in this game, obviously, Brady kind of engineers the comeback and does what he did against New Orleans, essentially. And just, I think he takes over play calling. I legitimately believe that. And, even after the game, after they win in overtime, him and Byron Leftwich are hugging, and Byron Leftwich, if I'm reading his mouth correctly, says, "That's my bad." So I'm looking at that, and I'm like, okay, well, Byron, are you going to just turn over play calling duties to Tom, or what's going on here, right? And I have a ton of respect for Byron Leftwich, Super Bowl, winning OC, former Steeler, good career before that, and a lot of things that he's done well in his career, but right now, the way he's calling games for Tampa Bay is holding him back. So I kind of hope Tom Brady takes over play calling duties, because when he has, things have looked a little better. And also just down the stretch and then overtime, it felt like the team just stopped shooting themselves in the foot. They stopped committing penalties that negated big plays, right? Like the Julio touchdown that should have counted or should have happened, but was called back because of a penalty. So, yeah, I mean, the Bucs continue to be just the biggest headache in the NFL, and trying to figure them out is like breaking a Rubik's Cube without cheating. So, I think the Seahawks down a spot. Another team that's regressing down to the mean, kind of the same stuff I'm starting to say here at the bottom half of this page. Also, another team that's just outmatched, right? They're not going to go toe-to-toe with Kansas City, especially down Tyler Lockett. The defense is kind of crashing down to earth. Geno, not looking as good as he did at the beginning of the year, but also, again, Tyler Lockett's hurt right now. Both those rookie tackles have taken a step back, which that's going to happen. You're a first-year player. There's bumps along the way. So Geno, naturally, his situation's gotten worse, so he's gotten worse. So, yeah, Seattle kind of coming down to earth, as I said earlier. Then we get the Jets, also down a spot, but good news is they're going to get Mike White back next week. Now, granted, he's still going to have broken ribs. I don't think they heal that fast, so I still think he's an upgrade over Zach Wilson. At this point, let's talk about Zach Wilson. I mean, you get benched twice in a year. I'm sorry, you're done. You're done at least for this year. And, Jay Glazer is reporting that the plan is to move on from him in the offseason. So it'll be interesting to see if that does actually happen. Who is buying Zach Wilson right now? I mean, you want to buy stock at its lowest, and Zach Wilson's at its absolute lowest. So what does that value look like, right? Is it a fourth? Is it a fifth? I have no idea. I mean, former number 2 overall pick. But yeah, he's just not the dude. And I mean, when Chase Streveler comes in, Chris Chase, whatever his name is, Streveler comes in, and I mean, the stadium goes over the moon when he hits that chunk play to CJ Uzomah, but it was also a play that should have been the easiest 6 points scored in that game, because Uzomah was wide open, but he made the throw too late and he left it short. I mean, major double whammy. They still get 27 yards out of it, and then MetLife goes bananas. So, I mean, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about where Zach Wilson is in that city right now. It's tough to play in New York, but I mean, yeah, at this point, they just got to move on. So we got to see what Mike White looks like. Hopefully the injuries aren't, holding him back too much, because I do think this team's a lot more fun to watch when they have a competent offense, and I think Mike White gives them that. Lions down 2 spots. I thought about moving them down earlier, because what the hell was that run defense? Playing at a third grade level there. I mean, I have no idea what I saw Sunday. And it's interesting because, you look at that line against, Carolina, it's like, why is it only 2.5 points? Why are the why are the Lions, in front of that field goal hook? What do I not know here? So I didn't end up touching it. And I'm glad I didn't, because somebody knew something that I didn't. And, Carolina clearly had the edge there. And I mean, like I said earlier, QB rushing props against the Lions. Thank me later. And yeah, just the rushing game in and of itself was just abysmal. And, Jared Goff, stat line wise, puts up insane numbers, but a lot of that come from behind, comeback duty. And ultimately they just couldn't keep up. And it's also tough once you fall behind a team that's gashing the run game. It's, you may be able to find a couple stops, but when you're like 2 and 3 and 4 scores down, eventually they're just going to have a drive where they, push the ball down the field and run the ball well, and they're keeping the clock rolling, so it's a really tough mountain to climb, and the Lions were unable to do that. So I'd be interested to see how they bounce back this week. Then the Packers, I know this is a huge jump up, and I still don't think this team is perfect by any stretch. We'll kind of talk about them in Miami right here, because I have them right here 10 and 11. And part of the reason, yes, I know Green Bay just beat Miami. I did watch that game, so you don't have to tell me that they did it. But whole season as a whole, Miami's been more impressive to me than Green Bay. But granted, their seasons have been a little bit flipped on a different axis, right? Like Miami starts out as the kind of the team to talk about in the NFL, and then they've cooled off. They've lost 4 in a row. Green Bay has been the complete opposite. They've been the team to talk about because of how bad they've been, and now they're starting to warm up. And this week against Minnesota, they're favored by 3, and I think if Christian Watson's healthy, I think that makes sense. I think this team has a legitimate chance to sneak into the playoffs. But look at this game. It really was a tale of two halves. Green Bay in that defense was the tale of the two halves, in my opinion, too. Like, Tua starts this game 6 for 9, nice, but those 6 completions were for 204 yards. That's insane. But then you get to the second half, and part of it I think is just like adjustments in playing the hot zone. Like Tua's chucking a pick right where Devondre Campbell's lined up, just because it's a rhythm offense. I'm going to get out and throw it, and Devondre Campbell said, "I know where you want to throw it. Pick." And then you get into Tua's head. He airmails that throw to Tyreek, and Jair Alexander. His reaction post game was great, but I mean, he's just right place, right time, gets the pick, and that's a huge reason why Green Bay comes back. Then they get just enough offense. Watson leaves this game. Jones is in and out of the lineup at points, but I was even watching this game with my dad. Obviously, you should spend Christmas with your family, and he's a football fan, but nothing crazy. But he saw that pass to Mercedes Lewis up the left sideline, and it was such a pearl that he was like, "Wow, what a throw!" And I'm like, "Right." I'm like freaking out here. I'm going bananas over what I just saw, and even kind of a casual NFL fan is like, "Wow, that was special." Shout out to Mercedes Lewis for holding that in, because, realistically, it probably wasn't a catch ball. It looked like it hit the ground. But anyways, long tangent aside, I think Green Bay is doing just enough right now. And if Watson is, as long as, let's wait for the diagnosis, as long as it's nothing insane, him and Dobbs, I think when they're both out there, this offense just looks so much better. And I think they're now building that chemistry with Aaron Rodgers where it's starting to really open up. Then you have the 1-2 punch with Jones and Dillon in the backfield. Lewis can make enough plays. He trusts Randall Cobb out of the slot. So all of a sudden, the Packers offense is starting to come to form. Still got Miami ahead of them. Part of it is also like, Green Bay still, I think, has fixes, to be made, right? They gave up 204 passing yards in the first 6 completions of Tua. So I think the defense is good, but there's still sometimes some holes in that zone. So I don't want to just catapult them into the top 10 when they still have to win out to even be in the postseason. So still want to give Miami credit for the entire season, but man, 5 picks for the last 2 games for Tua. I don't know what's happened. And it's tough. Like the Devondre Campbell pick almost just kind of, if you saw Tua as a Jimmy G clone, this was kind of a game where you could point to and be like, yeah, see, like he just has these moments where when the offense is clicking, he can have 200 plus yards and 6 completions just because the throws are open, and Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle are insane. But then also he'll just chuck a throw right into a linebacker just because he runs the offense. That's where the throw is supposed to go. He's not accounting for the defense being there. So just like how Jimmy G will chuck one at the linebacker, Tua kind of did that this week. And then the overthrow that I was just talking about a minute ago, sometimes when you get in his head, he can just make some bad decisions and he'll make some bad throws. And Green Bay capitalized on it. But man, this Miami team, they feel like they're too good to be missing the playoffs, right? Especially now that Jalen Phillips is taking that step forward and he feels like a legit, double-digit sack type of edge rusher. He feels like he's taking that step forward where it's like, okay, now the last big thing I was worried about your defense is there now. Like, I want to see this team in the postseason. So I hope Tua doesn't choke. And obviously, he's also in concussion protocol too. So do we even see Tua Tagovailoa next week? Yeah, a lot of question marks I need to answer. Is this Miami team unfortunately trending in the wrong direction? Baltimore up a couple spots. They're back at the top 10, but I mean, this team still gives me a ton of hesitation. They did clinch their playoff spot. Hopefully, Lamar's back next week. I mean, granted, the Steelers-Ravens game being flexed in prime time should give us enough of an indicator that the league knows that Lamar will be back. And that's going to be one of the huge storylines that I'm sure they're plugging through in the broadcast. Huntley then, in retrospect, that's true, did an okay job. Not nearly as good as he did last year, but this is a game where it's like, just I don't care how ugly it looks. Just we got to get the win. Had a couple good passes there. The run game still looks solid. Huntley ultimately wasn't super efficient running the ball. I do want to give credit. I skipped over him earlier, but the Falcons, Lorenzo Carter, it's not necessarily a great polished pass rusher, but this is kind of the game where it's just like, hey, go chase down the fast quarterback where his skill set can shine and be seen. So I think that limited Huntley and what he could do on the ground, but the Ravens offense kept moving the ball enough. Mark Andrews is a pretty solid game, so just enough. And the defense continues to play at a really high level. So, I'm anxious to see what Lamar does with this offense because they still feel like they need a dynamic, a game changer there on the outside. So I think it'll be better with Lamar, but how much better, I'm not too sure. On to the top 8 now. Chargers, Vikings, Bengals all won, but they're all going to stay, in place. The Chargers, that win wasn't necessarily the most inspiring. They controlled for the most part, but a couple of weird turnovers. I think the defense played really, really good. Weird that Herbert doesn't get a passing touchdown this game, but they also ran the ball well, and Eckler finds the end zone twice. So it doesn't really matter who gets those touchdowns, but it was just kind of a weird game. I felt like at multiple points the Chargers were about to pull away, but they just didn't. But I will say the Chargers pass rush was suffocating this one. And I think their coverage unit played a really good game, but Nick Foles looked beyond uncomfortable in the pocket. I mean, multiple times he's just like moving up to try to escape as soon as the snaps, give it to him. So, yeah, ton of credit there to the Chargers, and also just like, what are the Colts right now? But anyways, we've already talked about them. Vikings, they win, but they let the Giants hang around. They let, the touchdown 2-point conversion. They go to overtime. I was saying on the hurry up offense last week with JT, who, if you don't watch that show, definitely do. But JT's a Vikings fan. I told him it's going to be a 3-point game. I told you it's going to be a 3-point game. Go back, check out that video if you don't believe me. And that it was. And in overtime. Not in overtime, excuse me. Greg Joseph. How about Greg Joseph? The same guy who missed the game-winning kick last year against Arizona nails a 61-yarder. Are you kidding me? Christmas came early there for Minnesota fans, and they're now 11-0 in one-score games. So feels like they're gonna probably see some regression than me. I just hope for Vikings fans it's not in the playoffs when you see that. You'd rather just see that over the next couple of weeks of the regular season, but we'll have to wait. Then we get the Bengals at 6. They won, and it's tough to go into Foxborough and win games, but this game was a dragging to start. Like, I even texted, hey, another mention of the hurry up offense. I texted Mason, who's a Patriots fan, and I was like, dude, you watching this game? It feels like Cincy's about to blow y'all up by 40 or something. And then all of a sudden that stopped. All of a sudden the offense dissipated, so credit to Bill Belichick, and the defense makes some adjustments, but Trent Irwin did drop a touchdown too, so as good as Irwin was in this game, he also could have had a little bit more. Kind of just a weird game. Tale of two halves, but give credit to the Bengals defense. They kind of solidified down the stretch, and I think, as it's a one-score game, they made some big stops late in that game. The Eagles, they lose. I'm not worried. They fall because, I have to move the Cowboys and the Niners and Chiefs up because they win, the power ranking process. But, this top 5, I feel really comfortable with. So not worried about Philadelphia. I think Gardner Minshew looked more than fine, and I think next week against the Saints, I think he'll get the job done. I think Philadelphia will win, and they'll be able to clinch up that number 1 seed in the NFC. And that's also a game where Philadelphia can help themselves twofold. They can clinch the number 1 seed, but also beat New Orleans, thus improving the draft pick that they have. That is the Saints. So going to be a fun game to watch there for if you're a Philly fan. But yeah, they're down a couple spots. I'm not too worried. Maybe this is the game where their defense looked the most weak and fragile. But I think when an offense is playing at a really good level like Dallas was, there's only so much a good defense can do, right? Like, good offense is almost always going to beat good defense. So, credit to Dallas there, which leads me into the Cowboys being at number 4. This was a game where it's like, hey, if you're a Dallas fan, especially coming off the loss last week, this is a game where it's like, yep, okay, we're good. We're fine. We're back on track. Wasn't concerned. Never a doubt. This is the type of game where you can start saying all that stuff. Dak, I think, looked really good. Both running backs. The defense makes enough big plays. And they do it in comeback fashion, right? Like, they were trailing for a majority, the beginning of this game, and give a ton of credit to, this felt like the game where maybe Mike McCarthy could collapse, right? Like, I'm kind of sitting on my seat waiting for him. Like, what is McCarthy going to do here? What bad is going to happen here for the Cowboys? But no, this was a legitimate, very impressive win. I mean, the Vikings win, this one, some of the most impressive wins all year long for Dallas. 49ers, I mean, they handled business against Washington. We don't need to talk about this one. They're the better team, and it certainly looked like it. So good for the 49ers. They're now in the top 3. Then they get the Chiefs up in their spots, took care of business against a weaker Seattle team, so credit there to Kansas City. They're one of the best teams in the league, and that leads me into the Bills, who I still think is number 1, but Kansas City, Buffalo, right now, same record, and if not for the Bills beating the Chiefs earlier this year, The number 1 seed would be in Kansas City, but the Bills won that game, so they are the number 1 seed in the AFC. That's going to be a fun race to watch down the stretch. But that's going to do it for my Week 17 NFL power rankings. Tell me what you think down below in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Where's your favorite team at? Do you think they're in the right spot? Where would you put them? I'd love to have your thoughts. Anything you want to talk about football-wise from this past week, I'd love to talk about it with you in the comments section. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new right here and want to see more football content, just hit that big red subscribe button. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.